So I just want to welcome everybody to another episode of Industrial Logic's Twitter Spaces. We do it every Friday at 2 p.m. Central. And today we have a very special episode uh, with Joshua Kerievsky, who is the Kickstarter of the modern Agile movement. And he is the author to this new book that just came out. It's called Joy of Agility. So a little bit about Joshua's background. Most of you know him, but for the ones who are new to this, Joshua started his company uh, from his studio apartment in New York City in 1996, and it's called Industrial Logic Inc., which is kind of a very cool name for a IT company. And then since then, he has been helping, organizations around the world around the globe with agility. And even today, we have a lot of clients around the world that we are helping out. He is also a very well-known and sought-after international speaker, and he is regularly invited to a lot of conferences around the world. So with that, I would move over to you, Joshua, and I would like you to tell us a little bit about the book and what motivated you to write this book.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for showing up. I'd like to make this as interactive as possible, so love to hear your voices. I was motivated to write this book because agile has become a bad word for a lot of people. It's been, you know, commercialized, it's been packaged, it's been trademarked, it's been turned into a lot of basically roles and responsibilities and rituals to follow. Um, and there's been quite a number of people that have just said this is not something I'm interested in. It's not exciting. It's making my job worse. Um, I'm sure all of us have heard stuff like this. It's not been just a joyful experience. And I got into agility back in the 1990s, and we didn't call it agile back then. It was called lightweight software methods. And over time, in implementing agility within organizations, we found that it goes far beyond software. It's you could maybe make a pocket of an organization more agile. However, if the rest of the organization isn't too agile, the effects on the customer don't really show up. So over time, we started to see that people operations folks, sometimes called HR, needed to be more agile, especially in their policies for people, because we were trying to create teamwork, and there were incentives for individuals. It was counter to everything we were trying to do in organizations. So suddenly you start finding yourself working with people ops, people folks, and HR people. Then you start working with sales and marketing folks more, and before you know it, agility becomes something that you see is needed everywhere. And then, if you forget about the word agile, you just look at individuals or teams that are very successful, and then look at what they did. How did they overcome obstacles? How did they, solve challenges? How did they adapt in the face of change, of unexpected change? You see agility. You see genuine agility. So probably over a decade ago, I was very much influenced by the definition of the humble adjective agile in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and that definition, has stuck with me as being like the pure concept of agility, which applies to all human endeavors, even non-human endeavors. So animals can be agile, organisms can be agile. So I wanted to write a book that would share the joyfulness of being agile. So it's not, there's no critique of the bad stuff. There's nothing about how the agile industry has gone astray. It's a book that is filled with stories of people and teams and organizations that have demonstrated in tremendous agility.
Amazing. So before we move forward, I would like to announce that we are giving away a free signed copy of Joshua's new book, Joy of Agility. And The way to enter the contest is there's a tweet that I've posted on top, and there's a tweet that I've posted in the comments as section as well. And what you need to do is go and like and retweet the tweet that I've posted, and that would enter you to the contest. And we would announce the winner at the end of the day today. So during the space, even after the space, go ahead, like and retweet the tweet that I've posted. Mention your agility buddies in the comments as well, and it gives a chance for everybody to win this free signed copy. Uh, with that, Josh, tell us more about how do you define agility and for you what it means to be agile in all aspects of your life.
Yeah. So, first of all, I mean, I think agility is hard. It's not an easy thing. So, when we talk about, applying agile thinking or being agile in your life or your work, it's not like that's easy. Uh, but if you look at the definition of the word, the adjective, it is an adjective. It's simply an adjective. So, right, we say an agile surgeon, an agile dancer, an agile team. The definition, there's two definitions in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. I've memorized them because I find it useful to be able to, speak about them without having to look at the dictionary itself. And it's the first one is, having a ready ability to move with quick, easy grace. And I think all of those words are not easy to understand. When we say quick, some people think hurry and rush, and that's not what quick means. Easy. So easy is maybe the easiest to understand, but it's something to make something easy isn't always so easy, right? It's you can also do things quick and easy, and they aren't graceful. So sometimes you take the quick and easy path, and it doesn't lead to great things because you haven't considered what would be graceful in the long term, right? So having this ability to move or to work with quick, easy grace. That's the first definition. The second definition is equally as good. I almost don't even think of them as first and second. They're equals, in my opinion. It's just a different way of thinking about the word. And the second definition is having a character, being characterized by an ability to be quick, resourceful, and adaptable. Right? You have this ready ability to be quick, resourceful, and adaptable, and that's another way to think about it. So it's always three words. It's quick, easy, grace, or quick, resourceful, and adaptable. It's a Venn diagram, right? To be agile, you need all three of those things. Um, and that's the definition.
Thank you for that. Meanwhile, we have also been joined by Agile Author Tim Odinger. Welcome, Tim, to the space, and feel free to chime in anytime you want. I know, Josh, you have a story related to him as well in the book. And today we would really like to listen to some of the stories you have shared over the years with us, and also they are part of the book. If you guys are interested in learning how you can be agile in your everyday life, this is a book that has a lot of stories that you can relate to. And then also Joshua has kind of related them all to the six agile mantras that he just mentioned, a few of them as well. So, Josh, why don't you tell us about the six mantras and how you came up with them?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, first of all, when I started writing this book, I just started writing stories. Just it started with one story, something to really explain to people what does agile really mean. So, okay, that was the first story. I wrote more stories and more stories. Eventually, I had a whole collection of stories, and I needed to organize them into more of a book form. And that required understanding where these stories might go. I had originally thought that the stories would fit into the four guiding principles of modern agile, which is, if you don't know, make people awesome, make safety a prerequisite, experiment and learn rapidly, and deliver value continuously. And those you can find on modernagile.org. They're just four principles, four guiding principles, and we found a lot of value from those Beyond that, though, modern agile doesn't define anything else. It just says, great, these are the four principles. Use them, don't use them. It's up to you. We're not going to give you any kind of formula or roles and responsibilities. It's just the four principles. I got feedback from people saying, we need more guidance. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to write some stories to illustrate this. And over time, the stories were starting to fit into some of the principles of modern agile, but not all of them. And so that led to me questioning where did they fit? And that led to writing down some new names of things. And they ended up, I got highly influenced by a guy named John Wooden, who is considered one of the greatest coaches of all time, certainly of the 20th century. He was a legendary, award-winning coach and basketball player, and was famous for his coaching of the UCLA Bruins basketball team. Phenomenal success there. He used mantras, and he spoke about mantras. And so I got inspired to use the word mantra for the book. And I used one of John's most important mantras, which is be quick, but don't hurry. And that was one of what became six mantras. Some of them were harder than others to formulate, but ultimately the stories had to fit into specific mantras. And that's how I ended up with six of them. And that's where the stories from the book reside.
Awesome. Meanwhile, for the new audience, just want to let you know again, we're giving away a free signed copy of Joshua's new book, Joy of Agility. The way to enter the contest is there's a tweet that I've posted on top of the space. It has the directions, but you just need to go and like and retweet it, and you'll be part of the contest. And we'll be announcing it at the end of the day today. One lucky winner will get the signed copy. Um, there's a lot of audience. We would love to hear back from you as well. You know, any comments, questions you would like to share. So please go ahead and request for Mike if you want to come up to the speaker panel. Tim, you want to add something here?
Sure. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to find out that Josh didn't just collect software development stories and code samples, being known rather well and widely for technical skills. Josh, how did you come up with the idea of not using technical stories?
Oh, good question, Tim. I mean, I've, you know, I guess there was a moment where something happened when I moved from an apartment we had in San Francisco to a house in Berkeley, California, back in 2001, and there was a moment of setting up some stereo equipment where at that point, and you're talking about like February 2001. At that point, I'd been doing test-driven development for I don't know how many years, but maybe three or four, and it had really infiltrated my being. So what I ended up doing was I ended up setting up, and this is complicated stereo equipment, which was the old-fashioned stuff we used to have: a tape deck, a DVD player, or CD-ROM player, and then there's the amplifier, and then there's the cable box, for the TV, and just all these different wires and things. And I approached it in this test-driven way, and it I had not done that the prior time I set it all up in San Francisco. It was a disaster. You plug stuff in, it's in the wrong holes, then you got to turn it around and try again, and hours later you might got to get it working. This took 15 minutes, and I had found myself using a test-driven approach to just having starting with a failing test, and then getting it to work, and then improving the cables and how it made things look, and just keep going like that. That was the beginning of me wondering, like, this stuff I'm doing in software, it's starting to influence my life too. And then over time, working with customers, we would see again a need for agility in other aspects of work besides just building software. Now, I love software, I love creating software, but I also really love succeeding in business. And to do that, you need all kinds of people across an organization to understand what agility is and to be agile. So that's really where it started to go. And then you just you have experiences. I had an experience with a plumber in the house where, we had 3 different plumbers come out with wildly different estimates for fixing something, and realized that was very key to, solving problems, is having options. And instead of paying $7,000 to fix a plumbing issue, I paid $125 to someone who solved the problem instantly with quick, easy grace. They solved our plumbing problem. And I said, that's agility right there. Having the options is part of being agile, and not rushing into a solution that's going to cost too much. So it's really just, I guess, my consciousness of agility has expanded over the decades to the point where I can see agility in lots of things in life and work. And it's not, it's something that's what I really wanted to share with a broad group of people, is that joy that comes from being agile in many aspects of life.
It's
So,
almost
Josh,
like, oh, sorry.
go ahead, Tim.
I say, well, it almost sounds like the things that we do in Agile work in Agile because they just work generally.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of really what the heart of the software agile community came up with applies widely. And then, there are things like psychological safety, where, maybe we weren't talking about that back in the early days of the agile software development movement. And over time, you start to see how important something like that is. With the works of like Amy Edmondson and people like Linda Rising, who wrote about fearless change many years ago. You start to see how important, being fearless is uh, to high performance and to agility. How when you're afraid, you tend to go slower. So if being quick is part of the Venn diagram of agility, then what's preventing us from being quick? And fear is one of those things. So the book has an entire section which is inspired by a mantra by W. Edwards Deming called Drive Out Fear. And Drive Out Fear is filled with stories of how, to actually do that, how to create a psychologically safe environment, or how to approach dangerous situations with a degree of safety, and to understand that safety doesn't mean dwelling in a cave and not taking any risks. It's taking the right risks and having the right amount of care. So, it's basically the book's about, I mean, I'd say it's 30 years worth of learnings that I've put into these stories. And they're not all my stories. They're stories of colleagues. They're stories of famous people like Richard Branson or Oprah Winfrey or Chris Rock. Um, all of them are focused on teaching something that is inherently an aspect of agility.
Amazing. So, Joshua, we know you have wrote a lot of these, shared a lot of these stories from over the years with all of your experiences. We would love to hear some of those, any stories that really pop out. Please, if you can share them with us, that'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. The There's, I guess, when I think about all these stories, there's some that just rise up to be some of the most favorite ones, and ones that I've told many times. So one of the ones I tell is a story about Kenneth Cole. And if you ever heard of Kenneth Cole, the fashion person, he's started a large company that sells shoes and clothes and all kinds of things. And um, Kenneth Cole wasn't always, a very successful businessman. He started out, working for his dad in New York City. His dad had a shoe business, and eventually Kenneth wanted to start his own company. But it was the early 1980s, and the economy was not doing well. That was a tough economic time for any entrepreneur to start a business. But he did. He started his business, and it would have been really hard for him to get a loan at that point. Just with the economic situation as it was, getting a loan would have been difficult. He solved that problem by going to Italy and making a deal with some Italian shoemakers to create his shoes on credit. So they were like, "Yep, we'll take this chance," and so they made a whole bunch of shoes for him. These women's shoes, and Then he had to sell them. So he goes to New York, and there's this big shoe expo in New York City. Barely had the money to even get a room at the conference center, right? So all the shoe manufacturers would get a room to show off their shoes. He couldn't afford that. So he said to a friend, "Can I borrow your truck?" And the friend said, "Sure. What do you want to do with it?" He said, "I want to park it outside this Hilton hotel where they're having the shoe expo and sell some shoes." And he said, "Well, I'll let you borrow the truck, but nobody's going to let you park a truck in Midtown Manhattan. This is just not going to happen." Now, undeterred, he called the city office, New York City office, about this to find out, who's allowed to park on city streets. And they said, "Well, if you're an electric utility company working on the electrical wires, you're allowed to park all day long. Or if you're making a movie, we give special rights to movie producers to park on the streets." Instantly, Kenneth Cole went to a shop that made business cards and changed his business from Kenneth Cole Shoes to Kenneth Cole Productions, and basically said, "Great, yeah, we're making a movie. It's called Birth of a Shoe Company," and got permission to park the truck right outside the Hilton Hotel at Shoe Expo. They decorated the truck. They got a red carpet and stairs to go up into the truck, and then they showed off all these shoes there. They sold 40,000 pairs of shoes in 2 days. So that's a story that's at the beginning of the book, and it's to me, if you look at Kenneth's behavior, he was quick, he was resourceful, and he was adaptable. That's agile. He was being agile in the birth of his shoe company. So I love to tell that story, and yeah,
That's a great one. Thank you for sharing that. Before we move forward, just to let the new people who have just joined us to the space, to let you know that we are giving away a signed copy of the book that Joshua just wrote called Joy of Agility. And the way to enter that contest is there's a tweet on the top and in the comment section, and just go to the tweet, like and retweet it, and that's the way you enter. And we'll be announcing a winner at the end of the day. Um, and the book is out now, so it's available if you want to order it. You can go to joyofagility.com. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and several other online stores that we'll be sharing through our Industrial Logic social media handle. Uh, we would like to invite people from the audience to the speaker panel. If you wanna, ask a question, share one of your stories, or give some feedback, please feel free to request the mic. There is a microphone icon to the left bottom corner. Just click on that, and I'll bring you up. So, Josh, I know there's several, stories in there that are. I haven't read the book yet. Mine is on the way. But there's several stories about, these celebrities that you have observed during your, travels or during your experience, and, you observed agility and how they work, and we would really love to listen one of those.
yeah. Okay, so there's a story about the comedian Chris Rock, and there's a section of the book called "Break On Through to the Agile Side." So if you're a Doors fan, apologies to Jim Morrison and the Doors, because it was break on through to the other side. But anyway, it's break on through to the agile side, and that contains some stories that to me are exemplary of numerous mantras all happening together. One of those stories is about how Chris Rock creates one of his comedy sketches. So when Chris Rock performs on, let's say, a Netflix special or in a big auditorium, he's already done a whole bunch of work to prepare that sketch, that comedy for you. And he starts out in a very tiny little club, usually a club near his home in New Jersey. And it's not the typical Chris Rock you would expect to see. It's the scientific Chris Rock. He's got a yellow legal pad filled with ideas, and he sits on a stool, and he doesn't run around the stage acting, like he normally does. He's just stationary, And he's trying out material on the audience and looking for glimmers of laughter or smiles or anything to clue him in on what might be a bet worth investing in. So they're like little bets. And this story is actually from a book called Little Bets by a guy named Peter Sims. Wonderful book. And when I read about this story, I thought this is a beautiful example of, you know, what you might read about in Eric Ries's books on the lean startup. It's basically validating or invalidating ideas before you invest too much in them. It's something we purport to do in software development. Don't build that big feature before you validate or invalidate it. Similarly, with other creative concerns, what can you do to know more about whether you ought to, continue to invest in something like a joke, like something that's supposed to be funny? He has to act like a scientist. So Chris Rock will spend night after night in a very small club. I think people might even have to sign a non-disclosure agreement to not repeat these things because it's just very raw material that he's trying out. And once he starts to get some refinement of that material, he'll go to a slightly larger comedy club and continue to refine and refine until he can go to larger environments and test out the materials and refine it to the point where he's ready for the concert hall or the Netflix special. So he's continuously adapting his work. He's doing it quickly, right? It's a very quick process of revision and refinement that he's going through. He's being very resourceful in terms of, using all of his resources to, refine the materials. Um, trying diverse groups of people, trying to make sure it appeals to the right audiences and all that. So it's a very scientific way of creating his ultimate product, which is in that case a comedy set. Again, that's an example of agility, and it's something you can apply in your context. So that's a story.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So one question just, came up in my mind is, I know you are an agilist and, uh, I just wanted to know how did you use agility, in terms of writing this book? Because I know you have been collecting these stories for a long time.
Yeah,
So how
great,
did that come about?
great question, Manib. So yeah, someone actually asked me that too. It's like, because whenever I write a book, it takes me years, right? It's not particularly quick. But it's not that I'm looking at the entire process as being quick. It's more about what I do from day to day or week to week that I think is where the quickness is. So I definitely aspire to be an agile writer. And to do that, I need to get writing quickly and I need to get it in front of people so I can learn quickly. I want that feedback loop to be really fast. So as soon as I write some rough, awful sentences or something, I'll put it in front of people. I'm not too shy about doing that. And I'll say, this is unrefined, it's raw, but what do you think? Is this Does this move you in any way? Do you have any questions? Is there anything confusing? And that process of getting continuous feedback and refining my writing, right? I don't even think of it as writing. To me, all good writing is based on rewriting. So it's a lot of rewriting, but that's based on learning, and that learning comes from showing it to people and getting feedback, or it comes from reflecting on it and saying, thinking about, am I really telling the story the right way? And then ultimately, it can be working with an editor and someone that can, they call it a developmental editor at the publisher I'm with. Um, but it's a continuous process of creation and refinement and feedback from people. Like, as soon as I had even a few stories, I was putting them in front of students in my workshops, and seeing if those stories help them to understand certain concepts of agility or of modern agile. And so that's been the process for years. And I feel like you cannot really write a great book if you don't, um, you know, have the right community of people. So then, as the book matured, there were I'd say almost 50 people reviewing it on a Google Doc, putting in comments and asking me questions or saying, "Hey, this makes sense for a North American. This doesn't make sense for me in Europe. Here, what can you do about that?" Or frankly, there were a few stories that were some of my favorites, and I pulled them because a few people just really objected to them, and I felt like, well, I do love those stories, but I don't love them enough to, make people feel poor. That's a bit about how I write. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, Tara, thank you for joining the speaker panel. She's a colleague at Industrial Logic. And would you like to add something here, Tara? Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Munib. Josh, I was lucky enough to be one of the humans who got to take a look at the content that you were putting out there and processing and getting input for. And, obviously a lot of the work that I do at Industrial Logic is around psychological safety, but it's based in the world of technology. But my career started in kind of the behavioral space, and that has always fascinated me in terms of agility and failure. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your writing process with when someone would come to you and decide and say, I don't really love this idea, or this seems like it conflicts with that thing, how that kind of plays into that, like processing fear and being able to kind of do something with it intentionally while you're digesting all the changes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great question, Tara. You know, First of all, I want to say Tara made a huge contribution to this book, because she pointed out something that had been invisible to me, in when I was writing it, and she said something, which was, "Josh, you don't have enough stories about women," and I was like, "Oh shit, she's right." And so I immediately started to work on that problem, and you know there there are many more stories about women in the book because of Tara, and that was another thing. When I think about it too, there's a mantra in the book called "Be balanced and graceful," and there were too many stories about men. It wasn't balanced in that regard of gender balance. So that was like incredible feedback, and thank you for that, Tara. In terms of like, I've developed a kind of thick skin over the years because, you are going to get all kinds of feedback from people. And sometimes it can absolutely anger you almost. It's like, what do you mean you don't like this story? It's one of my favorite stories. Or, you know, there was one particular story that it was about the recession in 2008 and how I ended up navigating it. And someone was like, "Well, you just got lucky. That what you're saying about what you did wasn't really, to me, it's just you just got lucky." And I had to think really hard about that and go, well, maybe other people are going to think that too. So I'll just punt on that one, even though it's meaningful to me. That may sound lame, like I'm not standing up for my ideas, but ultimately I'm trying to create a book that uh, will really speak to people. And I don't want cognitive dissonance. I don't want stories that are just going to rub them the wrong way. And those stories that I love, I can repurpose them for other books or other ideas for later. So I'm not too worried about that. Sometimes, though, I get feedback that I just absolutely disagree with. And there was one particular thing that several folks all agreed on. They kept saying to me, "Well, you got to go do that." And I'm like, "Nope, I'm not doing that. That's not the nature. That's not the character of the book. I'm not going to make that change." So I don't know if I'm answering your question sufficiently, Tara, but if you're very sensitive to people giving you feedback, it's going to be hard to write. I think you're going to be afraid to show your stuff to people. I'm not. As long as I've told them the state of the writing, they'll say, "Look, I just wrote this. It's rough. So can I do better?" Yes. Right now, you're just looking at a rough version, so don't even worry about certain things. But I want to get your overall feel. You have to sort of frame what you're looking for. But yeah, if you're, I would just say you've got to be open-minded and willing to have people say all kinds of things, and you get to choose what you act on or don't. Is that what you're looking for, Tara?
That was perfect. Thank you, Josh. And I appreciate the shout out and also appreciate that you're so open to having these conversations. I think that that's really what agility is all about, is being able to not only consider adapting, but expect it. And so that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Tara. So, Josh, Joanna has also joined us on the speaker, but before that, we would like to listen to one of the stories, regarding women in your book, Joy of Agility.
Oh, absolutely. So I guess I could easily talk a lot about Amy Edmondson because she's in several different parts of the book. And I tell her kind of story of coming to psychological safety. And that's where early in her career, she got an opportunity to work um, in some hospitals where they were observing teams. So you're talking about doctors and nurses and all kinds of folks who are helping out with patients, the people that clean the rooms, just like whole teams. Her hypothesis had been that, closely knit teams that got along and spent time together and, knew each other well would make fewer errors. And that was the hypothesis she went in with. And, they spent many, many months looking at many different teams. And ultimately, the data came back and it showed that the teams that were not closely knit, that were not like didn't spend time together, hadn't worked for years together, like the teams that just came together kind of quickly and people barely knew each other, they made fewer mistakes than these closely knit teams. And it made no sense. It was the opposite outcome that she was, hypothesizing. She said, how could this possibly be? And then she started to think and realize, wait a minute, maybe the teams that are just thrown together where people barely know each other, maybe they're not reporting all of the errors they make, and therefore they have smaller number of errors. And that was the new hypothesis. So she worked with a new researcher to come in and help her, validate that new hypothesis. And it was in fact exactly the case. That is, the teams that were just thrown together, people didn't know each other, felt psychologically unsafe to report large numbers of errors. So they would sweep errors under the carpet. They would not report them. Whereas the closely knit teams where people knew each other and worked together for years were comfortable admitting mistakes and talking about those mistakes. And so, of course, they had a larger number of mistakes. It made sense. This was her journey to realizing how important psychological safety is to high performance. If you're in a situation where people are just, not really acknowledging problems, sweeping them under the carpet, not improving, you're going to have a pretty poor performance, whether it's a hospital or a software organization or anything. So I tell her story, and further on the book and other places, dive into psychological safety with respect to how it actually plays out for people in different situations. So she's one of the more famous
Yeah,
people in the book.
yeah, I see that she also gave a quote for the book, and there's several people who, gave out great quotes for the book. I'm looking forward to getting my copy. It's already on its way. So just to announce for the people who just joined the space, we are giving away a signed copy of Joshua's new book, Joy of Agility. The way to enter the contest is there's a tweet on top of the space and in the comments. Go to that tweet, like it, retweet it, and you'll be part of the contest, and we'll be announcing one lucky winner at the end of the day today. The book is also out to be bought on joyofagility.com. It's also available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and several other online platforms. So, Joanna, thank you for joining the speaker panel. Go ahead.
Hi, folks. So something that you kind of mentioned, I think, at the beginning of the space, I was wondering, how do you approach people in teams who feel like they've been burned by Agile in the past and are now kind of like viscerally skeptical of anything that smacks of Agile?
Yeah, that's a great question. first of all, I empathize with them and explain that what they've been told is agile isn't really agile at all. It's been inflicted on people. It's been introduced with tools and tickets and just a lot of misunderstanding of agility. I also do like to say to people that, to me, we're in the early days of agility. I know that might sound crazy to some. It's like, what are you talking about? The Agile Manifesto was written in 2001. I still think we're in the early days. If you look at the Stoics, Stoicism, it took them hundreds of years to really clarify, what Stoicism was all about. So I like to look at it that way because, first of all, it makes me feel better. If some new flavor of agile framework is, infesting the environment now, I don't have to worry too much about it because it most likely will die within a few years, and there'll be something else that comes along, and hopefully something better. So ultimately, I come back to, let's discuss what agility really means. And let's understand that it is joyful to be agile, right? If to solve problems and to succeed sooner, which is the subtitle of the book, is joyful. As engineers, we love to solve problems. And even better if we can solve them sooner than later. So ultimately, what I'm trying to do is come back to, what does the essence of agility mean? How can we then become more agile and not be sort of terrorized by the tools and tickets and the kind of ritualistic roles, rituals, and responsibilities approach to agile. That's just kind of made up industry stuff. It's not agility. Agility is a wonderful thing, and it's something where I'd say, let's not even, we don't even have to use the word agile, but we do want better performance. We want a happier workplace. We want to come excited to work. We want to be able to be psychologically safe with our colleagues. How do we begin to build that into our organization or our team, and get excited about that?
Hey, Josh, this is Tim again.
Right.
So, a lot of people in the agile space are really, pushing, supporting, selling a methodology, and you're supposed to stay with the process, stick with the recipe, do the thing, and it should come out all right. Your chapter, on the other hand, says be poised to adapt rather than stay the course. And I'd kind of like to, hear a little bit about adaptability versus recipes.
Great question, Tim. Yeah, so this phrase, and that's another mantra in the book, be poised to adapt. I got that phrase from the resilience engineering community. So they're all about, they actually look at disasters that happen, whether they're buildings coming down or planes coming down or whatever, and they study what happened. And part of that group of people is famous for talking about something called safety 2, which is different from what is considered safety 1. And safety 1 is where you look for problems. What happened? What went wrong? Safety 2 tends to look for what went right. What happened to, that someone was able, a human was able to make something work in the midst of maybe a crisis. How did they prevent an accident from happening? What went right? So let's not just study what went wrong all the time. Let's also study what went right. Well, out of that community of people formed what's really the resilience engineering community, and they talk about being poised to adapt. So it's not just adapting. Being poised to adapt means that you're prepared. You're in a position of readiness to adapt. And that takes some mindset change. It takes some practice. There's a whole bunch of stories all about that. My favorite of which might be the Gossamer Condor, which was the first human-powered airplane. So literally someone on the ground able to take off and fly with no motor, right? This was this was something humans wanted to do for centuries. And it finally happened. And the story of the Gossamer Condor is very inspirational. And at the heart of it is this ability to adapt rapidly, to learn rapidly. In modern agile, we say a principle which is, learn, experiment and learn rapidly. That's the principle. Experiment and learn rapidly. That's exactly how the Gossamer Condor succeeded. It was the entire process was engineered such that it was safe to do experiments. So even the McCready was the leader of this effort, and Paul McCready's son was often inside the airplane flying it, pedaling he'd be pedaling a little bicycle, but it was 2 feet above the ground, 4 feet above the ground. Like, if he came down, no one got injured. Um, it was an incredibly safe and effective way to experiment and learn rapidly. The entire engineering approach was that of being poised to adapt. And, it took them about a year, and they finally succeeded where no one had done it before. And a funny story in terms of estimation, we talk about estimates in software all the time. His estimate was he could accomplish this in 3 months. He was wildly off, but it didn't matter because in the span of human existence, even a year is nothing for accomplishing that incredible goal of human flight.
Taking that now, the book isn't about software development, but taking it back there for a moment, that would suggest that we should be ready to abandon or discard practices rather than staying with them. What are some things you've seen where maybe agility has demanded that we abandon one practice and take up a different one instead, or just let it fall?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question again, too, Tim, because you've been on this journey with me for many years, and there were things that we were doing in agile software development early on that we just thought, like, this is essential. You've got to do this. You have to have a time box. You don't have a time box, it's no good. It was really weird for us in 2007 to start experimenting with dropping the time box. We were just like, what if we didn't do it? And this was a time when, people were talking about Kanban, and people were talking about other forms of planning. And we just thought, well, we're delivering something once a week. And what would it be like if we were to just drop that cadence and just start delivering whenever we finish something? It was the beginning of our journey towards continuous deployment, which we started doing around 2009. But it was amazing to me to discover that the time box, the iterations in XP or the sprints in Scrum, were not actually essential. And the deeper I looked into it, the more we started to see that there were actually um, hurdles or friction coming out of having the time box, and that we could remove that friction if we worked in just small batches, as they call it in lean. So this journey, and there is a story in the book called "The Day We Stopped Sprinting," and it's all about our experience of having this astonishing breakthrough to realize that sprinting wasn't essential to being agile. So yeah, we've adapted and adapted and adapted over the years our process. And today when we're building software, we're doing like ensemble programming and pair programming. We're doing continuous integration, continuous deployment. We're doing we're trying to deploy psychological safety, or practice and preach it, and live it. We are sometimes doing continuous retrospectives instead of on a cadence. We'll also sometimes mix in a cadenced retrospective as well. A lot of things have changed in terms of the way our Agile looks today when it comes to software than it did in the past. And to me, the Agile Manifesto got it perfectly right, which is said we are discovering better ways of working. That's an ongoing, continuous thing. And if our process is the same today as it was 5 years ago, we're probably not, paying enough attention. These days we're doing things with discovery trees, and we're then combining discovery trees with forecasting. So how can we use forecasting to know more about our completion of things on the discovery tree? Very interesting change is constantly evolving. So to me, yeah, it's a big thing is to be poised to adapt even in your process. And I could go on and on about this topic, but that's a pretty decent summary.
And by the way, for the audience, yes, he can.
Absolutely, he can. We are going in the last final 10 minutes of the Twitter space. Once more, I would like to announce we are giving away a signed copy of Joshua's new book, Joy of Agility. There is a tweet on top of the space and in the comments. Go and like and retweet it, and you'll be part of the contest. We'll be announcing it at the end of the day. Also, this is a recorded session. So anybody listening to the recorded session, you guys can also enter the contest by liking and retweeting the tweet posted on top. And last 10 minutes, anybody from the audience like to come up and share their thoughts, please feel free to request for the mic. So Josh, who would you say this book is, targeted for? Who should buy this book, and who can really benefit from this book?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think that's another fabrication of the writing process. So people say like, oh, so if you're going to write something, who's your audience? Who is your audience? You need to know your audience before you write a thing. I'm like, no, nonsense. I want to write it for me. I want to write something that I can read and go, yeah, that's valuable. I think that's valuable. So I didn't really write this with a target audience, but your question's still very valid, which is who is the target audience? The target audience is anyone who's interested in being more agile, which you could think, wow, this guy's super ambitious. He wants this book to be in everybody's hands. You didn't even pick a particular industry, because I do genuinely want my surgeon to be agile. I would like a lawyer of mine to be agile. I would like my tennis coach to be agile and to help me be more agile on the tennis court. Um, Agility. I mean, I'm a big tennis fan, so I watch tennis. I remember hearing Chrissy Evert, one of the greatest female tennis players of all time. She was talking about Naomi Osaka and said she's agile, and I thought, wow, that's so cool. They're referring to these players as agile, and absolutely they're agile. So really, it's anyone that's interested in greater agility. And part of I do want to say that I really would like the book to fall into young people's hands too, because there's stories that many of us know already. You might know the Van Halen Eminem story. Well, I guarantee you, someone in their 20s doesn't. And so, I absolutely put that in there to talk about safety and wanting them to, some of the classic stories, just to be aware of them, so they might influence their behavior. So it's really for anyone in any industry, in any context, and people just in life. It's useful for life stuff too.
Absolutely, there's a lot of wisdom in those stories. I would recommend everybody buying a copy. It's a great book to have in your library. It's a great book to gift somebody. And I know there's a special going on, Joshua, right now on Amazon. So if you guys want to buy it, this is the time to do it. All right. So we're going into the last 5 minutes. Any last comments from the speaker panel? And we'll end with Josh. So Tara, would you like to say any closing remarks?
I think for me, as I mentioned, since I was lucky enough to be a part of this process, for Josh creating this book and being so open to feedback, I think it's so important that we start to recognize, and I think that, and I know that I think Joanna asked the question about, when people feel like they've been burned by agility, it's such a valid thing. And to Josh's point, definitely empathize, but just this book is so great for literally any human being who wants to be able to deal with life in a way that is not so obsessed with predictability, but rather being able to move in a more agile way. And I kind of look at it as like kind of a revival of what that word actually means, and that it has nothing to do with transformations and all of these multi-million-dollar projects. What it really has to do with is the way that we interact with one another. And I think that really comes through in Josh's stories.
Thank you, Tara. Tim?
Oh, I really have nothing to add. I was also part of the editing, so we didn't rehearse any questions. I wasn't, I didn't have a list or anything, but I kind of knew as I was asking that there were some points that I really wanted Josh to have the opportunity to describe today. I think this is a great book. I've been through all the chapters and the reorganizations, and I still think it's a great book. I'm recommending it to a lot of people, and I'm happy to be able to recommend it to people outside of the software industry. So I wish it all the success possible, and I
Thank you.
recommend it to all the listeners.
And Tim, there's a story in the book that you contributed. It's called "From Sith Lord to Super Boss," and it's about a real experience you had with the customer, and it's a wonderful story. So I thank you for that. Uh, I just add too that just by you all being here today, you're all certified. Kidding around. The thing about, like what I said at the beginning of this session, was that Agile's become highly commoditized, packaged, sold. It's become a huge money machine for large consultancies and so forth. Um, we're not in this for the money. We're saying buy the book, but we want to spread the joy of this thing called agility. We want to right the ship in terms of, we don't want people having the kind of experience Joanne mentioned, which is a very poor taste in their mouth with quote large agile frameworks and so forth. We want this to become something that is genuinely a wonderful and joyful thing in one's life and work, and that's the purpose of the book and of promoting it. So I really appreciate everyone being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all those stories with us on this platform. And thank you all the speakers who joined the speaker panel and the audience. Again, we are giving away a free signed copy of the book. The way to enter the contest is like and retweet the tweet that I've posted on top and or in the comments. And we'll make sure that you're part of the contest. We'll be running a tool that allows us to pick a winner, and we'll be announcing the winner at the end of the day today. With that, we'll end the session here, and we want to let you know that this is another episode of Industrial Logic Studio Space that we do every Friday at 2 p.m. Central. So please follow the host, co-host, and the rest of the speakers, and we will notify you of the next session via direct messages and via tweets that we post here. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manip. Thank you for everyone.